Good morning and welcome to What's Working Wednesday. It is my mission to do this in just 15 minutes. But as you all know, I get very, very passionate and excited about listening skills and the difference they can make to your life. So I'm Cheryl Andrews. I'm the founder of Step by Step Listening and also the facilitator of the group Manage Your Critic, a community committed to non-judgmental listening. So please do pop over to the group and find us. Come and join us with our discussions and our live training sessions every Friday at 8 o'clock. So good morning, Chris, we've got here, and Mo. Lovely to have you both on the call today. Any questions as I go along, please just pop them in and I will pause and answer questions as we go. Today, I'm going to talk about how to listen for change. Last Wednesday, if you haven't already seen it, it's just check out the video. It's on the page called The Importance of Celebrating Change. Well, that's great if you decide you're going to celebrate change, but what if you're not even noticing it? What if you're not even paying attention to it? And so one of the things I want to talk to you about is the importance of noticing it and some 3 practical ways that you can do that. So one of the reasons that change often isn't celebrated is because people wait. So if you, let's say you're wherever you are now, and this is where you want to be. So you want something to change and or something has changed, and we don't notice the impact of that change, if you like, quickly enough. And it's because we're not training our attention, we're not listening out for it, we're not watching and being really curious about what is happening. So if you take an elite athlete who is training for the Olympics and they want to get to a certain speed, every time they hit a personal best, every time it's 1 second faster, 2 seconds faster, whatever it is, they celebrate. So they go, yes. Okay, so that's what the last week's video is about. It's about the importance of doing it. But what if it is just little tiny minute changes and you're just not noticing them? So I want to talk to you about the 3 ways. I've just got some notes here to remind me. So one of the things I do when I'm coaching a client is I'm listening for changes in language. And so I talk through in the Manage Your Critic book about the 7 steps to clarity, and C is for curiosity and the L is for language. So it's listening to your own language. One of the things I noticed with my own language is that I was saying things like, I'm not very confident with that. But when I asked myself, what kind of, it was like, well, actually, I wasn't very confident. I needed it. I was saying present tense when it was past. And so now every time I catch myself reframing it, and so actually, well, that's something I used to not be confident with, but I'm actually really okay with it now. That's a past tense experience. When I change my language to past, I will catch myself and I'll do to celebrate it, because I want to start to create a new neural pathway. I want to create a memory both in my muscles and in my whole body that when I am talking about something, I need to double check with myself, is it factually correct that I am not very good at it now, or is it something I used to not be very good at and I've developed? So one thing is your language. When you talk about the other things I pay attention when I'm listening to clients is they'll say things like, oh, I always do that, or I never do that. I talk about universal qualifiers a lot in the book. So I would challenge you, I'd ask you the question, what kind of always and what kind of never? And I can tell you now, I have never. No, actually, that's not true. I have occasionally, there's one person who said, no, I never ever do it. But so I set them a task to pay attention for it in the next few weeks, and they started to notice. So they never remembered that they did it, but they did do it. So normally when we use always and never, particularly if you say to someone, oh, you're never very helpful, or you're always mean, or whatever you say to people, they will get defensive, because truthfully, it's rarely true. It's rarely really accurate. So things like always and never, I'd ask yourself, what kind of always? And then listen out for language for yourself. Notice if you're changing the language, because I'm listening for my clients. If they go, I lack confidence, to I want to have more confidence, because if they lack confidence and more confidence, there's kind of a change in their language, that they must have some awareness that they have some confidence, but now they want some more. And so my job is to ask questions that puts them on the confidence, and it helps them understand what's happening now. What kind of confidence have they got right now? What confidence would they have if it was just the way they'd like it to be? And then to notice every time something changes, whether it's their physiology, their smile, their words, their tone, their pace, if anything is changing in the way that they're speaking about confidence, I will put their attention on it. And the way I do it through coaching questions is I would say, so when lack of confidence and you want more confidence, what happens in between? Or I might ask, is there anything else about more confidence? And is there anything else about lack of confidence? And I might say, and is that confidence the same or different? And I help them to start to really recognize what the differences are. And this is, people used to say to me for years, I will show you overanalyze things. But it's this drilling down that gets you that clarity. It gets that awareness of what's going on. So number one, to identify change, you can start to pay attention to your language. Now, particularly if you're a parent or a manager or a motivator, inspire of others, it's really easy for you to hear one word and think they're saying the same thing. So one of the things that can help you stay interested and be curious and stay listening rather than judging other people is to play this game with yourself. Be curious about small changes in the positive right direction that you could put people's attention on by asking questions. All right, you can't assume there's been a change, by the way. You're just getting curious that there may be a change, and you're putting people's attention on by asking questions about it. So one of it's language. The other way that most of us know, and it's often people when they talk about, I'm not really motivated by money and things like that, it's because numbers for them don't tell a story. But another way you can measure change is by doing numbers. So you might measure, like the athlete might measure the speed or the distance. In your business, you might measure how much money you've taken. You might measure how many customers you've got. You might measure how quickly someone responds to you. So if you send an email, you might be measuring their effectiveness by how many minutes it takes for them to come back to you. You might measure it by the number of words that people say or don't say. So maybe you think a good communicator is someone that uses fewer words, whereas somebody else might think a good communicator is somebody who is more articulate and describes it more. So we have a way of measuring things by numbers. And for me, I used to only saw numbers as being giving me bad news. I never seemed to see numbers as a perfect something to strive for. So for me, what I've had to learn to pay attention to is the very small changes in numbers. So for Mark and I, when I set my business up 10 years ago, one of the ways that we financed it was I had some savings for a couple of years, which I lived on those and gave myself a wage with that. And then I started using credit cards in order to pay for more coaching training, to pay for my personal development, to pay for my websites, etc. And we got into a bit of a bind, if I'm really honest. We got into about £42,000 worth of debt on a credit card. And 5 years ago, I think it was, we started to have a monthly money meeting. And we started to notice if our overall debt, so the combination of his business, my business, and the personal finances, if it had gone down by £10, that we owed £10 less, we would celebrate it. And over 4 years, we have cleared the credit card and we've cleared the mortgage. So that just starting with that £10 and celebrating a small change in money and having those honest conversations about what was the money telling us, and started looking at what we were spending our money on and where was the money coming from and what could we do about those. So it did generate conversations. But the main thing is we'd avoided looking at the numbers because we couldn't see anything to celebrate. It just felt like we were in debt and it wasn't going very well. What were we going to do about it? So as a couple, when we started to look for small changes, that made a massive difference. So guys, we've got Mo, Chris and Dee on the call today. If you can, anything's resonating with you and you're thinking, right, yeah, I'm going to start doing that, please put it on there. It's great feedback for me to know that I'm on track and that what I'm saying is useful to you. But also just think about, how do you feel about numbers? If numbers aren't motivating you, then it might be your critic. It's the story that the critic's telling you, because numbers are just black and white. They're factual. Also, numbers can be distorted. When I look at my account sometimes in my business, I'm self-employed. There's lots of things I'm allowed to legally put through to offset my expenses. So I look at my profit alone, I could be quite disillusioned, thinking I don't make much money. But actually, if I look at my turnover and I compare it with year on year on year, or I compare it with last month, and I look at my expenditure and I be really clear about the information, then sometimes I can look like I haven't made any money, but actually it's because I forget the story. I forget the other things that are really, included, if you like, in that information. And this happens with words when we're listening to people and when we're looking at our numbers in our accounts. So from the business point of view, also children with their exam results, etc. Schools with stats, numbers without the background information behind it. So just because someone gets a particular result, often we are very narrow in what we're interpreting it being. but numbers are a way of measuring change. Another way that the coaching world do it, and I use this sometimes with clients, is if you think about, if you've got something you want to change, guys, by the way, please put it in the comments. I'd love to hear what's going on for you right now. If you think about the thing you want to change, and you imagine if it was just the way you'd like it to be, it would be like what? And imagine that gets a score of 10. And if it wasn't happening at all, and it's the worst case scenario, it gets a 0. Then what you can do is score it right now. And then what that does, it gives your logical brain a measure that's tangible, it's a number that's tangible, and it gives you an emotional way of, you know, just trusting and guessing what the number might be. Good morning, Loretta. So numbers are one way, so you'll get numbers in life, and it'll be up to you how you interpret the story, how much you manage your critic when you want to take on that information. So numbers can measure change as well. And the last one, that this is where my work really comes in, and it's where the work of David Grove and Clean Language has really come into its essence, and this is what transformed my life, is when we measure change in our emotions, in the way that we feel. And that can be less tangible. But often, well, not often, I would say nearly always, every decision that we make has a logical part of it. You know, can I afford it? Do I have time to do it? So there's a logical process. And there's an emotional driver. What's the benefit to me? Is it going to be good for me? Is it going to be good for the people that I care about? Is it going to be good for my environment, good for my planet? You know, whatever your values are based on. So you're going to have an emotional part of any decision you make and a logical part of it. And often we measure and celebrate just based on tangibles, on the logical side of it, which then means a big chunk of who we are as a human being isn't being honoured, it isn't being heard. So through the power of metaphor, you can start to understand what's happening for you. So a great metaphor a client had this week on the Do, Delegate or Ditch Mastermind, which is our 8-week course, where we really look at the language you're using around time, how you make decisions, and how that impacts your ability to plan, and how that is influencing your ability to work, learn, and live at your best. And the client said to me, when I started at the beginning of this program, he said, I felt like a puppet. He said, but I didn't have control of the strings. Somebody else was pulling it all. And he said, I know that it's my life and I know I'm in charge of it, but it was like I was being pulled around. Whatever anybody else wanted, anybody else's requests, I was running around and like they were pulling my strings and I was trying to please everybody. He said, so I felt like a puppet where I didn't have much control over the strings. He said, and now I feel like the puppet master, where I'm getting information in and I'm choosing what I want to do with things. So that's an emotional way of measuring a change in your body, a change in your situation, which gives you a way of celebrating those changes. So metaphor is a really good way of checking in and thinking, so that's like what for myself? So questions you could ask yourself. So if confidence, if clarity, if change was just the way you'd like it to be, it would be like what? So you get a metaphor of what it'd be like. And for me, what's interesting with both Mark and I, when he's working at his best, it's like a lazy river. He's got one of those big rubber rings and he's just chilling down the lazy river. And when I'm working at my best, I'm like on the whitewater rapids and I'm kayaking down and I'm really fast. But what I've realised is that I can only do that when I know that he's got a lifeline on the lazy river. So we're connected in some way. So he has a rope that I know that if I get a bit too close to the waterfall, I've got some support. And that's actually when we did the metaphor for that, we started to recognise that's when our monthly money meetings came in, because I was quite happy for him to do his kind of way of working and I was quite happy doing my whitewater rafting. And what's actually happened over the years is I've realised it's really good to take a break from the water rapids and get over onto the lazy river and just to chill out and to be. And he's worked out that, you know, he actually quite likes whitewater rafting as well. So we've upped our pace in some places of our life, our partnership, and we've downed it. Metaphor gives you that ability to communicate with people that you really care about, to communicate the complex things, the way that you feel. And I was just feeling irritated. I was feeling a little bit isolated. I was feeling like, and it was always down to me to sort all the money out because I managed the bank accounts, he put the money in. So it was always like every decision was down to me. So therefore, if we were in debt, it was always my fault. That was kind of the story behind that one. And it was only when we had metaphor to help me explain to Mark without it blaming him or anything, just saying, this is how I feel right now. And what I'd like to have happen is X, Y, and Z. So the one way you can track change is through changing in the metaphors. So noticing if it's like one thing at one point and then noticing whether it's changing. So you do have to consciously decide to reflect, to notice, listen and pay attention in order to notice those change. So I promised myself there's going to be a short 15-minute what's working video. I am now coming up to 15:15. It's 14 minutes past. If you've got any questions whatsoever, please pop them below. I'm about to go into a day of clarity calls now with clients starting at 8:30, but over this afternoon, this evening, I'll check in and answer any questions that you've got. I always value feedback. If this is useful to you, please put a like. If you're going to do something different as a result of listening to this, if you go away and try this out and you start noticing change more and able to celebrate it as a result of it. But I'd love to know, how are you? What change do you want to have happen? What could be your way of measuring it? And how will you celebrate it? And I'd love to hear that more from you. And for those of you that are going through change, maybe it's been imposed on you, or maybe you just really have got to that point, you'll start to notice patterns. You know, year on year with this credit card thing, it wasn't working for Mark and I. It wasn't solving the problem. It was just, we were just going down instead of coming out. And we didn't have money invested in things that were going to give us money back. When we just get to a point, don't you, in life where you go, do you know what, something's got to change. And it's an overwhelming feeling. It cannot carry on the way it is. So you'll have a repeating pattern. If you're at that point and you know you're ready for change, you're ready for your thinking to be challenged, you're ready for me to really put your attention on the details so that you can start to notice really what you want to have happen, and really be prepared to challenge yourself to think differently, and you want things to be different, then please either put down the bottom, I'm ready for change, because I do have some free coaching calls available still in January. I think I've got 4 left. And I'm more than happy to do a 20-30-minute call with you to see what we can do to set you up for success. If that's of interest, let me know. If not, have an amazing week. Join us in the Manager Critic group. Leave your comments, and I'll do my best to share any pearls of wisdom I've got to set you up for success. Lots of love. Bye.